One Punch Man Season 3 Episode 12 was pretty good on the second part, very weak on the first part. The second part is easily the best we've seen in One Punch Man Season 3. However, this sometimes makes me wonder if they're understanding what they're adapting. We're definitely not talking about the retcons, as I think we're way past that. I'm talking about adapting a bonus chapter of King at the beginning of the episode, but actually skipping an entire segment of Atomic Samurai's disciples finding another dragon level monster. The first half of the episode was a legit slideshow. Fights simply didn't feel like fights. They legit felt like a school presentation. You either have static scenes that takes too long or have scenes that just don't breathe. For example, the shot of Gums already being behind Pig God is supposed to be menacing, but I kid you not, it lasted less than a second. Darkshine vs Bug God was filled with static scenes, not to mention the weird speed lines when a character isn't even moving. Saitama meets Overgrown Rover and the art and animation is just wonky, except for this sequence when Pochi attacks Saitama, he dodges and delivers the punch. The punch's shockwave was also handled well. We have to see Neon attacking Saitama, which is a scene that felt very jarring. I kid you not, you'll feel much more movements from the manga than the actual episode. We then transition to Tatsumaki vs Gero. Some scenes are good, but as always, very weird transitions. A scene of Tatsumaki's hair floating up, the next scene her hair is normal. You really don't have that in-between animation of her hair going down. A lot of static scenes that takes too long like this one. I did however like how they handled the 300 times gravity and how Tatsumaki counterattacked after. Nothing insane, but at least it moved. We go after to the fight of the episode, Orochi vs Saitama, and to be completely fair, the way they handled this fight is much better than the shit show we had in episode 5. Really good sequences like Saitama stopping the Water Stream Rock Smashing Fist horns, the Orochi beam explosion attack was also handled well, and then we get to what I think is the best consistent animated scene in the entire season. This right here just looks fantastic. The way he was running, the fluid movements when he jumped, and the punch itself all looked very good. If only the entire season has consistent animation like this, it would be what this series actually deserves. Now, I'm pretty sure all of you know the situation with the retcon chapters. This season has covered a lot of things that manga readers consider as filler or non-canon. Phoenix Man vs Child Emperor, Amai Mask vs Do-S, and the Narinki squad getting killed. This fight of Orochi vs Saitama is also another victim. What we've seen in the episode is sadly not what the manga considers as canon. They actually adapted a pre-retcon chapter that is supposed to happen even before Black S fights against Atomic Samurai, specifically in chapter 108. Very confusing stuff. Although the fight we've just seen is pretty good production-wise, contains the best animated sequence in season 3 in my opinion, but it sadly lacks heavily when it comes to the general lore of One Punch Man. But fear not, we're here to explain how the fight between these two is in the official manga, and in the process explain why it's important for the story of One Punch Man. So Orochi goes to confront Saitama, he finds him and attacks him immediately. The way it was handled in the anime, same as the pre-retcon version, was different. Orochi uses one horn attack, Saitama stops it, they both talk, Saitama breaks parts of his horn and Orochi attacks again. However, the nature of the attack is different in the canon. Instead of using one single horn attack, he attacks with 4 of them, and Saitama brushes them off like they were nothing. And this actually scares the Monster King and doesn't attack again. The canon version after has this scene that doesn't exist in the anime. After Saitama scares Orochi in the canon, Orochi senses that Saitama emanates an insane amount of pressure, kinda similar to what Boros felt when he finally encountered Saitama. What happens next is kinda similar. Rover awakes, Orochi orders Rover to attack Saitama, he doesn't listen, and Orochi puts 2 and 2 together, concludes that Saitama is the one that took down both Koketsu and Elder Centipede, and that he is the rumored monster of Ghost Town. Now this is exactly where both versions differ heavily. The retconned one has Orochi excited about the fight against Saitama and transforms to his battle state, which is exactly what happens in the anime. However, the official manga is much better when it comes to the lore and foreshadows a lot of things in the future of the story. Orochi here does get excited, but not because he's a warrior that wants a fight between the strongest versus the strongest. He gets excited because he finally found a worthy sacrifice. But a sacrifice for what exactly? Orochi after takes off his mask and reveals how his face exactly looks like. This does not exist in the anime. He destroys the ground beneath Saitama, forcing him to go deeper underground. Orochi falls in what seems to be water at first, but it's actually lava. And you can clearly see right behind him a huge stair that takes to an altar that has some sort of wall carvings behind it. Orochi explains to Saitama that this is an ancient temple he discovered that even Gero Gero doesn't know about. We get this double spread page of Orochi's true form that again we didn't get in the anime, but you can also notice that he heavily resembles the carvings drawn in the wall behind him. We have to jump to a flashback of Orochi. We have the narrator explaining that even though Gero made Orochi grow in strength through many sacrifices, her offerings no more sufficed. However, the call of his instinct, which is a pretty interesting wording, led him to dig deeper to harness the energy located in the depths of Earth. He reaches and finally finds the temple, and that's exactly where he discovers the mural. In the carvings, he sees a bunch of people offering what seems to be other creatures, items, and food to the Monster King. He says that he somehow was able to understand the language that was carved in the wall, which said, "In the distant future, our god will be reborn on Earth." This led Orochi to realize that his destiny is to become god, wore a mask after and pretended to follow Gero to find the right sacrifice, which for now he thinks that it's Saitama. But after he finishes his story, he realizes that Saitama isn't really paying him any attention, since Saitama is used to hear villains talk about their backstory and why they're entitled to have this and that, which is something he said in frustration in the pre-recount version and the anime. Saitama is bathing in the lava. This and the fact that he doesn't care about him, he's not scared or worried, made Orochi extremely surprised. This irritates and angers the Monster King, which makes him initiate his next attack. Apparently, he started sucking energy from the core of Earth, which resulted in making earthquakes and erupted volcanoes. He absorbs that energy and launches it towards Saitama. This attack is called the Gaia Canon, but surprisingly, Saitama, being Saitama, stops this with a killer move series, not a serious punch but a serious squirt gun. This attack is just him splattering that lava towards the Gaia Canon, which completely cancels out the attack, and just the same as the anime, Saitama follows this with a normal punch that leaves Orochi in pieces. However, there is a clear difference in the canon version. Saitama is aware that he didn't kill Orochi, maybe because prior to this, Orochi said that he has parents and Saitama didn't want to kill him. We know this because Saitama after tells him that he only wanted to discipline him like his parents should have. After that, Orochi, who's left in a dire condition, starts crawling and climbing the stairs towards the altar, and that's when we see what we saw in the anime. The wall debris starts crumbling, revealing that the entire mural was actually hidden, showing to Orochi that he was absolutely nothing but an additional sacrifice to the true god, who was a character we've seen in episode 11, specifically in Homeless Emperor's flashback. They then after show us a very important panel of the moon looking down on the crater. I'm not going to spoil what this signifies for only anime watchers, but this is a very important panel that foreshadows something in the future of One Punch Man's story. Now, this canon version explains a lot of things. The entire reason the Monster Association exists is because Orochi wants to find a worthy sacrifice. It also tells you that Orochi must be special and connected somehow to God, since he was able to read the language that he never saw before. It also clearly tells you that what you thought is the big bad of this arc is nothing but a pawn to an entity far more stronger and dangerous. In the anime, you don't really understand the gravity of these and what they mean for future events. Now, unless you've been living under a rock, One Punch Man Season 3 Part 2 has been announced, scheduled for 2027. A lot of people, including myself, are rightfully not happy with this decision, seeing how poorly Part 1 was handled, getting the lowest score on IMDb of all time. Only one episode is above the rating of 6. And since Part 2 contains back-to-back fights and it never stops, people were hoping for a change of studios. Well, yes, we do get it. The full blame for how disastrous it is almost lies entirely on the corporate companies that didn't give the studio enough time or resources to carefully craft this season. But this doesn't mean the studio is off limits. At times when watching the season, you kinda get the idea that these guys are not really understanding the series. Very poor choices almost in every episode. That's why people were hoping for a change. We're also not buying into them having more time to produce this season just because it's scheduled for 2027, since Season 3 was announced years before it was released and they only had less than 6 months to create it. That's the reality and the expectations we have now, forced on us by the production of Season 2 and especially Season 3. Don't twist my words, we sure hope we're wrong, and since this is not a new season but actually serves as a continuation paired with the heavy backlash they've been getting, they would start working on it as soon as Part 1 ends. But fans certainly shouldn't be blamed by lowering their expectations and fearing for a poor adaptation of their favorite series. We're expecting lack of information throughout the year, no release of any PVs, and if they do, it's going to be pre-animated, events featuring One Punch Man but has nothing to offer except etc, etc. I'm actually working on a video explaining how many chapters they will cover in Season 3 Part 2, make sure to check it when it's out. Normally I'd be joyful with news that One Punch Man is getting kinda another season so early on in 2027. We actually wouldn't be waiting for 5 to 6 years. But this time, to be completely honest with you guys, I had hoped for a change of studio or not have a continuation at all. The manga is already peak, easy to read, and the anime at this point is only damaging the series. So final verdict, I think the fight between Orochi and Saitama was handled correctly. The fight was well animated and really beautiful sequences. However, the very first part of this episode didn't make me feel like I'm watching a finale of a series like One Punch Man, to be honest. It ruined the episode for me. However, the second part made me forget about that slideshow. I think the episode is pretty good solely for the Orochi versus Saitama fight.